Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to Getting to Know You. I'm your host, Robert Jaquay. On today's show, we're going to be speaking with Christopher Hawver, who is the Executive Director of the Albany Pine Bush Commission Preserve. We've heard about the pine bush, we may have visited it, but after today's show, we're going to know a lot more. So let's go talk to Chris. Chris, I want to thank you for agreeing to be a guest on the show today.
Thanks for having me here.
Now, before we start talking about the Albany pine bush and all the things that go around with it, I'd like to have our viewers know a little bit more about you, where you came from, and how you got to this position you have right now.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Columbia County, in the village of Kinderhook, and I went to school. I got my undergraduate and my graduate degree from the State University of Plattsburgh, and I did my graduate work at a research institute near the Canadian border in a Jack pine barrens. And Jack pine barrens are similar because to the Albany pine bush in a way that they're both pine barrens, but still different enough. But I focused specifically on fire ecology and fire management, and I got my master's in natural sciences. I came to Albany and volunteered in 1992 in the Albany pine bush and applied for an internship in 1993, and I've been here ever since. Basically, I moved through, I started in the field of science.
Okay.
And then over time, got more involved in some administrative and management duties, and became the executive director in 2000.
Well, it's nice having you here. Pine barrens. What are pine barrens?
Pine barrens, it's a habitat type that they're basically found only in the Northeast. It's a globally rare habitat type, found only in northeastern U.S., no place else on the planet. We have them in Albany, we have them in Cape Cod, we have them in Maine, Massachusetts, New Jersey, Long Island. Some of the differences are about where we are here is in inland pine barrens versus a coastal pine barrens. The Albany pine bush is obviously inland, but Long Island or Massachusetts, like in Cape Cod, or New Jersey, that's coastal. Very similar, but still some differences.
So pine barrens are, I mean, it's clearly put the two words together.
Right. You have pines,
okay.
Obviously. That's one of the major tree species. You have pines. And barrens are usually very dry, droughty soils, nutrient-poor soils. So only certain plants that can tolerate those conditions or are adapted to grow there. Barren, primarily, I think the term would have come from agriculture. So they're poor for farming, okay, historically.
Okay. And are dunes a part of barrens normally?
No,
not necessarily.
Not always.
Okay.
You know, some pine barrens are on glacial till, like in Maine. But in the Albany pine bush, certainly we have sand dunes. You know, the hills that people see when they drive on the New York State Thruway aren't just hills from glacial activity; they're actually windswept sand dunes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now you mentioned a really important word, glacial. Glacier. So let's really go back in time. And how did this whole thing get created here?
Well, 15,000 years ago, we had the Wisconsin Glacier, and we had 1.5 miles of ice over where we sit today. And over time, as the climate changed, the glacier started to melt. That meltwater formed into a large glacial Lake Albany, and the sediment was sorted into different sediment types, and the primary sediment that was left behind as the lake drained was sand. Glacial Lake Albany extended from, Newburgh to Glens Falls, historically. And then when the lake drained, it was somewhat smaller, but we had all this sand left behind, and that was a major building block for the Albany pine bush.
Oh, it's a huge lake. And now, I didn't ask you this before when we were chatting, but when you have Sand Creek Road and you have this, you know, there's a part of Colonie, for instance, I'll talk about Colonie, it has sandy soil.
Right.
Would that have all been under the lake?
That's all part of the original pine bush.
Wow.
All the way into Schenectady.
Okay.
Yep. Into Clifton Park, Glens Falls.
Okay. So what makes the Albany pine bush or a pine barren so very special? Why would one want to concentrate on it?
I think I think it's probably, there's a number of factors. It's being a pine barrens, it's very rare, and it's the species that make the habitat rare. So it's the plants and the animals. We have the plants that are rare, and there's animals that are dependent on the plants. So, combined, you have an ecosystem that's very unique. It certainly looks unusual compared to your typical backyard. If you think of something, habitat in the Northeast, you think of forests and woodlands, and you don't think of scraggly pines and shrubby understories and things like that. And of course, we have everybody's heard about the endangered Carner blue butterfly,
Right.
our resident species. But there's a number of other species that have been recognized of significant conservation value or need by New York State, and there's another 42, so there's 43 species that are recognized as being very important.
Now, in the early days, when this was settled, people were here. They obviously didn't consider it to preserve it.
No.
It was kind of an odd place, and there was a bit of danger associated with it, right?
Oh yeah, and it was a major trade route between Schenectady and Albany, and there was the old King's Highway, and there's stories about robbers being on the trails, and you have to be careful when you're traversing at night or even during the daytime, and it was particularly in the summer, it's a very hot, dry place. Sandy soils typically are very dry, and if the folks that I work with in the science and stewardship field, they always let me know when they come in from outside that it's at least 10 degrees warmer than what the airport says, which is true.
Yeah, having walked through there a couple times, I agree. There's days when you say, "Wow."
July and August, they're pretty warm.
Now, this actually, when you talked about the highway, it was really, I'm not going to call it a footpath, but it was very narrow.
Very narrow.
And then it was a stagecoach route, right?
That's right.
Charging very little for, several miles. And there was a tavern there, apparently, on the route. And there's a rumor, was it the tavern that presumably where people got murdered and stuck in the basement?
I can't say for sure, but that's what we've been told.
Okay. A little bit
But
of
it's not like that anymore.
Okay, a little bit of
it's
mystery
much more
there.
safe now.
Okay.
The preserve is a comfortable place to be.
Clearly safe. Now, why? It's a preserve, and so what do you have to do to make sure that you conform to what a preserve has to be? I mean, as far as regulations or how did that happen in this area?
Well, what the organization I work for is the Albany Pine Bush Preserve Commission.
Okay.
And this commission was set up in 1988 by a law. New York State legislature passed a law, part of the Environmental Conservation Law, Article 46, for what it's worth. And it established the commission, and it established the preserve. So before that, we had some random parcels of protected lands owned by, say, the city or the town of Colonie or the state. Now the legislature set up a preserve to specifically protect that land with goals, and a commission to oversee it. And the commission's made up of the state, the local municipalities, including Colonie, the county, the Nature Conservancy, which is the world's largest conservation organization, and then there's 4 private citizen members that sit on that board. So they oversee the management of the preserve and the staff. So the preserve, when it was set up, really had no goals. So part of that language in the law was stated that we had to have a management plan. So the law had certain things saying that we must manage and protect the pine bush, but with not a lot of detail. So from that sprung a management plan. And we review and update that at least every 5 years now.
Now, because the pine bush is surrounded by lots of things. I mean, there are major routes and traffic. There's development. So was there a serious concern that was a springboard to the commission saying we don't want to have any more encroachment, or was that not necessarily the motivating factor?
No, I think what really happened is the reason that the preserve and the commission were created was from the urging of a lot of local groups like Save the Pine Bush, which is a local advocacy group, and the Nature Conservancy, and other concerned citizens that recognized, this place has some unique character, and there's a lot of rare things that go along with it. And it's neat, and it's in our backyard, and it needs protection. So I think that kind of started and jump-started things. I think the development people recognized that development was starting to push the pine bush over, to the edge of possible extinction. So this helped to try and balance that, and that's one of the things that the Commission does now, is try and make sure that we can balance both conservation for the pine bush, but not exclude economic development.
Now, what's the size of the, I'll call it a parcel, what is the size of it right now?
The preserve itself?
Yes, yeah.
The preserve itself is 3,010 acres,
Okay.
and the current management plan that we have specifies a preserve of 4,610 in a certain configuration, and the overall goal for protection, our protection plan, is just to build contiguity. Put it together. We have a jigsaw puzzle, make it fit, so you have, if you think about it, you have things that intervene, species can't move back and forth. And we think about everything from a butterfly to a deer to a bear, but think about plant seeds.
Right.
So the more contiguous something is, the more viable it is, and that's the overall goal.
Now, with these routes, I mean, this thought came to my mind. I mean, are you concerned about, emissions from cars and things like that? I mean, obviously the thruway shoots right.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that our science staff are looking into now. Does air quality have an impact? There's the whole buzz about climate change. Is climate change going to have an impact on the vegetation that's in the pine bush now? Is it going to impact the growth of some species and accelerate others? We don't know. And that's some of the things we're starting to look into now. Just this past winter, we did a snowpack study. So we're going to start to look at the differences in snowpack over time, okay, and how that might affect certain plants and animals.
Now, you mentioned your science staff, so there are people who are well trained and well qualified to go and keep their eye on things and see if everything is going okay or if something is turning, right?
Right, right.
And you have to do some special things with this preserve in order to keep it sound, right?
Right.
Most significantly is your fire management and the fire burns, which
right,
are the burns.
Right. The prescribed fire program, that's something that we started. We were actually the first entity doing prescribed burns since the early part of the 1900s, when we started in 1991. We've burned over 1,000 acres, and the reason that we do that is pine barrens, as we talked about before, pine barrens are fire dependent. They need fire to survive. They either need fire to clear out the understory, to remove brush, to open the area for sunlight because they need full sunlight. Sometimes some of these plants don't even release seed without the heat of a fire. They're very adapted to fire. So what we do is, because obviously you can't have wildfires occurring in an area like Albany, we do small burns to mimic the effect of wildfires. And that's something that we've been doing, and we've seen a lot of positive effects on plant and animal species over time. And that's one of the things, going back to our science staff, what we do is one of the things that we focus on is adaptive management. So we do these prescribed burns, and then we go in and monitor the next year. And we have certain objectives that we're looking to reach, and the question is, have we reached them? And if not, why? And if we haven't, do we need to modify or adapt our management techniques? So it's this ongoing.
Okay. Is there a cycle to it? I mean, I remember traveling down 155 and not knowing about this all, and
Right.
thinking, my God, this place is on fire. What are they going to do about it? And then finding out later. But do you have a cycle like you do it every so often, or is it determined by conditions, or?
It's both. It's kind of like a long-term planning and then shorter term. A significant amount of planning work has to go into these prescribed burns, as you can imagine. I mean, obviously fire is a dangerous tool to be using if you're not well trained and very careful with it. But we do long-term planning and looking at certain areas that may have not burned for decades, several decades, 50 years, 100 years. So in some of those areas where we may actually go in and mechanically thin. So we go in and we remove some of the overstory trees, we mow with a heavy brush cutter, and then we let it sit, and then we'll burn it the next year. So it's easier to control and you get better effects. Other areas you could burn, say, every 5 years.
Now, prior to all the man's burning, nature was what you're depending on in terms of lightning strike, but you can't certainly predict when that would happen.
No.
Count on it. But it could happen in spite of your burn, right?
Right.
And then you'd have to do some kind of control.
Yeah, one of the benefits of, there's basically two simple benefits of doing these prescribed burns. One, obviously, is for the ecosystem, but two, for social reasons, that by burning you remove that understory, that underbrush. So if there were a lightning strike, an unplanned ignition, it's easier to control. So there's not that buildup of organic debris. So if there is a wildfire, it's easier to control, and then we have these established fire breaks or trails where the fire can be contained and stopped by the fire department or the state.
Okay. Now, clearly, I mean, I witnessed this, and I think I saw some trucks there, but you have to let people know this is going to happen.
Absolutely.
And so do you plan ahead for a burn? I mean, how do you do it?
Well, basically what we do is on an annual basis, we look across the preserve and identify certain units, management units, that may need certain prescribed fire treatment, as we would call it, a burning. And then from that, we make sure that we have all of our plans in place. And there's a specific plan for each one of those units, and they're approved by the state. And then from that standpoint, we go basically between March and December, and any day that may present itself, which are fairly few and far between, with appropriate weather conditions and environmental conditions, we can actually go out and burn. But before we do that, there's a large public notification program that happens. At the beginning of every year, we do mailings to people. But every day that we burn, we make phone calls. All the fire departments, all public officials, all law enforcement agencies, and a number of residents that want to be notified.
So clearly, it's on the day it happens that
Yes.
you do all this, and it's got to be out to them. You know, my little humor here. I'm thinking of the wildlife, and I'm thinking of the Bambi scenes. You know, obviously, do the animals obviously adapt to this kind of thing?
Right. They're adapted, and you know, there's different ways that they're adapted. So if you have wings, you fly. If you can run, you run. If you can burrow, you burrow. Because if you burrow even a few inches below the soil, like a turtle or a snake or a toad, it insulates you. And the way we burn very slowly.
Okay.
I mean, the simplest way to describe it, we burn backwards, into the wind. So we start a fire, and it burns very slowly into the wind, and that's why we have to have these very exacting conditions. So the fire moves very slowly. So it minimizes the impact on wildlife as well. And then in other situations, the burn units are fairly small. You know, they could be 1, 2, 10 acres. They're not like, you know, they're not 200-300 acre burns.
When you do a burn or after a burn, is it a period of time? Do you cordon off the area, or so people can't go there?
Yeah, it's the area is posted and patrolled the day of the burn beforehand, usually starting around 6:30 or 7 o'clock in the morning, and we don't start until probably noon.
Okay.
And then it's closed for the next probably 2 days, and it's patrolled. The fire has to be out the day that we leave. All the smokes have to be out, but sometimes they'll come back, you know, overnight, and we go back and we monitor and continue to extinguish.
Okay. Well, and as far as going there, I mean, we've talked about the preserve and the concept of preserving, but it's a place for people to go and be with nature.
Right.
I mean, step outside of the city or the car and be in a totally different world.
Right.
So you have trails.
Have trails,
And
20 miles.
20 miles of trails.
Yep.
Okay. And you have signs telling people a variety of things.
Yep, we have different trailheads, and we have trail maps available usually at the trailheads. And I think we'll probably talk about the Discovery Center. That's
Yep.
probably the best place to start for people.
Okay. Well, let's start there then.
Well, in the past we had, you know, like I say, we have roughly 20 miles of marked trails. We have 7 to 9 different trailheads, depending on the time of year. And there was really no central place to start. So folks who knew the Pine Bush knew where to go, knew where to recreate. You know, they can hike, they could bike, they could horseback ride. But people new to the area, they didn't know where to start. So there was no central location. And this Discovery Center, which we opened in June, is just that. It's your front door. So you have a place, people new to the area, or people that may not be comfortable just going out for a walk in the woods with small children. They have a place to go, ask questions, learn about the Pine Bush through our exhibits, or just get some simple information like a trail map and go out on the trails, or ask about programs. You know, are there programs upcoming for, you know, I have a 6-year-old daughter, or I have a 12-year-old son, I have a 15-year-old son. Is there something that they would be interested in? And the people there at the Discovery Center can help them and provide that information.
So now the Discovery Center is the old SEFCU building, right?
Right, on 155.
Yeah, and we've been watching it transform. There's good parking there, so you don't have to park along the highway.
Nope.
And so you go in and you sort of get the lay of the land about what what this is all about, and you get an idea of the history.
Right, right.
Before you venture out, right?
That's right. So the Discovery Center kind of gives you an idea of what's unique about the pine bush. And then it kind of brings you into how it was formed. We talked about some of the glacial activity and why fire is important, how species interact. And then it talks about our management. We had talked about our fire management or mechanical management that we do. And then there's a whole section on people. Historically, how people have used the pine bush for a trade route or for pitch, for turpentine making, things like that. And then a lot of the research that's happened with external researchers or even some of the local school children.
So it's a real learning center.
Yes.
And you say there's also places for, in effect, classes.
Yes.
Programs for people.
Yep. We have a specific classroom space. We have a teacher's resource center with resource information for teachers to prepare classes, lesson plans. But we also have lesson plans that we're producing right now, so we'll have them available for teachers and classes for the upcoming school year. Not that the children want to hear that now. Students, I would.
Well, the stores are telling them it's coming anyway.
Yeah, it's coming, right? The commercials. So for September, we'll be set, and we'll have specific programs for schools. And one of the key aspects of that is making sure that we're providing programs that meet the New York State curriculum standards, because we know that's important for teachers. So we want to make sure that we provide that opportunity.
Great field trip. I can see it now.
Great field trip.
Great field trip. Now, is this when you go to the Discovery Center? Is this something that people have to pay to get into?
No. No, there's no admission to the center. That's free to the public. There's modest expense associated with programs. So, for example, there might be a program like an owl prowl would be a program that we would do. So in the evening, we'd have a program led by an educator and some staff, and we'd listen for different owls and call for owls. And that's usually $5 a person, or for a family. It's a modest expense.
I imagine there are people who want to do this, and so that really is not much compared to what it costs for a movie.
Right.
Okay, and so and it also, I was going to say, it's not necessarily self-conducted. It can be, but you do have people who will guide you.
At the center itself, yes.
Yes, at the center itself.
Yep, the Discovery Center, you can walk in at your leisure and walk through. And one of the things that we decided that was really important when we developed this center, and this is, I should have said, this is something that's been in the making for over 10 years. And our staff have traveled to 42 different centers like this across the country, mostly in the Northeast or Eastern U.S., to figure out what works and what, more importantly, what doesn't work.
Uh-huh.
And one of the most important things was for your exhibits to be interactive, something to do, and not just read text. So that was one of the focuses for us. And I think we succeeded at that pretty well. But going back to your original question, so you can walk through on your own, but there's always a volunteer docent there to simply answer questions or lead you through if you'd like to be led through.
Okay. But when you get into the preserve itself, it's really you've got your maps or your guide maybe,
right.
and that's yours to do.
Right, unless there's a scheduled program, which there certainly may be. I mean, there could be a scheduled program for a tour in the Pine Bush, or a classroom may be led by one of our educators.
Okay.
But on a day-to-day basis, the preserve is yours to explore on the trails.
Well, I hope we're inciting some excitement here. So how about programs? How does someone find out about what the programs are or what's going to be coming down the road?
Probably the best thing to do is look at our website, which is albanypinebush, one word, .org, albanypinebush.org, or you can always call our number, which is 518-456-0655.
Okay.
But the website's probably the best because that's updated. So it has a lot of the public programs are on there, and they describe what they are. Excuse me, and then there's also conservation work days, where some people, if you want to just come out for 2 or 3 hours on a weekend and get your hands dirty, or if you have a day off during the week, or if you have a different work schedule, come on out and you can help us do some trail clearing, boundary posting, invasive species management, stuff that we really need to get done. There's a lot of activities that we need as far as stewardship, which is actually pretty fun.
It certainly sounds like. I love your terms. I'm learning all sorts of new terms that I'm going to investigate them more when but invasive species.
Yeah.
So what is that? It's alien presence, right?
Yeah, invasive species is kind of a jargony conservation word, I guess. Invasive species are either a plant or animal that's usually not native to the area and somehow displaces or has a negative impact on the native habitat.
Okay.
So people probably hear about zebra mussels. Zebra mussels are a non-native species that have certainly plagued the Great Lakes.
Right.
They clog water pipes and things like that. People have probably heard of purple loosestrife. Purple loosestrife is a wetland plant, beautiful,
Yes,
pretty
yes,
plant.
Yes.
Horrible for wetlands.
Clogs up.
Because there's no wildlife locally that eats it, so it just grows at the expense of native plants, and eventually will fill in the whole wetland.
Yes.
So it turns into a field.
Yes.
So that we have a number of native species, or I'm sorry, invasive species in the preserve that we control through various means, and then replant the area with native plants, much like agriculture.
Okay. Now, how can, when someone goes there, let's say they're not going to go to the Discovery Center, well, we'll talk about that, but if they just want to go, drive your car up and go into the trails, is there a period of time which they can do that, or is there a period of time which they shouldn't be going in there?
Well, the preserve's really open dawn to dusk. So in the best place to access, if you don't want to go into the Discovery Center, is at the Discovery Center. There's a trail right there behind it, and you can do a short loop. That's probably the easiest place to go. But like I said, going into the Discovery Center, you can just walk in and ask somebody behind the desk. There's a person behind the desk, and just ask for a trail map and say, where else could I go besides here?
Okay.
That's
So
the easiest
it's
thing.
not really monitored or policed, is it? Oh, I shouldn't say that probably.
Well, I mean, the preserve is policed by the DEC forest rangers.
Yeah, okay.
They're our enforcement presence. So things like to make sure that people are following, doing appropriate things
Right.
like making sure you stay on marked trails. One of the problems that we have is people create new trails and further fragment the ecosystem.
The independence, right?
Well, it's mainly an issue quite often with mountain bikers.
Okay.
And I can say that because I'm an active mountain biker, and I know that some of the more challenging areas in the pine bush are these illegal trails, but it's really important to not use those trails so we can close them and let them grow in, because it's not just a forested habitat, it's a sensitive ecosystem that we really need to try and manage and maintain.
So people can bike.
Bike, hike, walk, photography, you can hunt, you can fish,
Okay.
which is something that a lot of people don't think about, the traditional uses. Hunting is, it's a traditional use that the only time hunting really you see much hunting activity is for in the fall for deer.
Okay.
And it's archery only.
It is archery. Good.
Yes.
Good. Now, when you mentioned fishing, because we talked about this before, where does this go east? Let's say from 155 New Carner Road. You actually have a little break there with Lincoln Avenue, and you go into another portion of it. And is that where that's where the lake is, right?
Right. That's Rensselaer Lake.
Rensselaer Lake.
Or 6 Mile Waterworks.
That's it.
So it's actually managed. That's part of the preserve,
Okay.
but it's actively managed by the city's water department. So the preserve goes as far east, currently right to Fuller Road.
All right.
So we go from Fuller Road all the way west, roughly to the Schenectady-Albany County border. And then on the other sides, north and south, we have Central Avenue and Western Avenue. So that's basically our study
Contained
area.
in that area. Yeah.
Yep.
It's amazing because they're right in the heart of all this traffic and homes
Development
and all that
and
stuff. And now, in adding on to the Pine Bush Preserve, you probably have to do some negotiating with people because you do want to grow to that larger, your
Right.
4,000 plus.
Right.
So you have your eye on some parcels and
Right.
are probably working with people to.
Yeah, there's several pieces of property that we're interested in and they're identified in our management plan. But the key is for us is we can only work with willing sellers.
Yep.
So if you're not interested in selling your property, then that's your prerogative, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And sometimes people, and we can only purchase property at fair market value.
Sure.
As an instrumentality of the state of New York, we're using publicly funded dollars here, so we want it. It has to be fair market value. And sometimes people think their property or feel their property is worth more than what our appraisal may be.
I'm sure.
So which is
Okay, but that's a challenge, but you
Yeah.
have your eyes on the future.
but
and
we do pretty well.
Yeah, yeah, and it does have a sort of a patchworky kind of quality to it. Back to the Discovery Center now. Are there separate hours for that?
Yes.
Okay.
Discovery Center is open every day except Monday. It's open Saturday and Sunday 10 to 4 and Tuesday through Friday 9 to 4. And that information should be on our website, which is albanypinebush.org.
Okay, okay. I must say the website has lots of wonderful stuff on it. I mean,
That's
there's
good to
all
hear.
sorts of things, the history, who was there, little tidbits, plus your program. So it's very complete and very thorough. You have the commission, you have a board,
Right.
and you have a lot of cooperation with the communities that actually are involved with
Right.
this particular area, and so there's active participants from the communities to make sure that there's a balance,
Right.
working with you all.
And within the town here, the town's a perfect example. Supervisor Brazell sits on the board, and she's an active member, and has been for as long as she's been supervisor. And we also work with the planning department here, too. So, for example, when there's development projects within our study area boundary that we talked about between Fuller Road, Western Avenue, Central Avenue, and the county borders, that development proposal would come to us for review, and we can provide comment on that. We give that back to the planning board, and it's just advisory. We're not a regulatory agency, we're an advisory body, and we provide those comments to try and make sure that we're balancing both the conservation of the environment with the economic development, because it's not really mutually exclusive. There's usually some kind of balance that we can meet.
But it's nice. I mean, I remember, I've been here almost 30 years now, and I remember, when about the new Karner butterfly, right? The
Karner blue butterfly.
Karner blue butterfly. And, some people kind of make some jokes about it all, but did that particular issue bring heightened awareness to it and maybe more attention, or has it just been a variety of things over the years?
I think it's been a variety of things. I think the Karner blue has brought a lot of attention, both positive and negative. What I've, in my time here, I've wanted to help people to understand the public, to understand what a resource this is. It's not just this place where there's a butterfly, and it's not a place where there's just a butterfly so you can't develop.
Right.
It's a lot more than that. You've got 20 miles of marked trails. You've got all these recreational opportunities, and it's a habitat so unique, like nothing else, right here in your backyard. You've got 3,000 acres. Where else do you have 3,000 acres in the capital region?
Incredible park, really. I think it's a wonderful asset. Before we close the program, is there anything that we might have missed or something you'd like to mention?
No, I don't think so. I appreciate the time. It's really a valuable resource for, since we're here in Colonie, for the town of Colonie, but the whole capital region. And I think we'll see a lot of that now with the Discovery Center just recently opening. We're going to see a lot of school groups coming in. We work with a lot of school groups now, but now that we have a facility, our front door, it's going to make a big difference.
Absolutely. We've all been watching it, so now we should go take a look at it.
Go take a look.
And I want to invite our viewers, please, to connect and scope it out if they don't. I mean, it's quite possible there are many people who have not been there in
Right.
this area. They just sort of drive by it. So there's no excuse anymore as far as I'm concerned.
No, everybody's welcome. We'd like to have everybody come and see.
Thanks, Chris, for being my guest.
Thank you, Robert. I appreciate it.
And thank you for joining me on Getting to Know You. I hope you enjoyed today's program and will join us next week. Until then, have a good one.